Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Read Aloud. You're welcome to move up. It's a little bit noisy in the rest of the cafe today, so I want you to be able to hear the wonderful program that Gerry Greenberg has prepared for us, and I'll let him introduce it to you.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Is that good? Okay. Okay, I'm reading today about a Korean marathon runner who was sometimes referred to as the Korean Jesse Owens. He was the winner of the marathon race at the 1936 Berlin Olympics. And those of you who are familiar with that time period might remember that this was the first world stage for Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, and they were their aim was mainly to prove the superiority of the so-called Aryan race in the Olympic competition. As a result, they did succeed in winning a great deal of medals because they had a system very much similar to what the Soviet Union had later, where they produced athletes on a factory system. It was a really high priority propaganda item. But someone like Jesse Owens, product of Ohio State University, you can see the applause now? Okay. Gave the lie to a lot of this propaganda by winning a host of medals and also capturing the affection of a large amount of the crowd at the Berlin Olympics. Lesser known was this Korean athlete named Sohn Kee-chung, who was the winner of the marathon race. His name is still not known in Olympic annals today because he was forced to run under the Japanese flag and also to use the Japanese version of his name, which was Kitei Son. And after, 73 years, they've still been unsuccessful in getting the Olympic Committee to change the record to reflect the fact that his name was Sohn Kee-chung and not Kitei Son. He did win the marathon race, and his countrymen finished third. They all on the award stand. They protested this situation by deliberately covering up the Japanese rising sun symbol that they were forced to wear on their uniform. And this is reminiscent of what happened in 1968 in the Mexico City Olympics, when John Carlos and Tommy Smith, two American sprinters, raised their hand in a Black Power salute to protest what was going on racially in the United States at that time after the assassination of Martin Luther King. So really you had a situation where it calls to mind both Jesse Owens and the protest later on of Tommy Smith and John Carlos. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read first a passage from the Olympic Marathon book, which is the history of all the Olympic marathon races by David Martin and Roger Glynn. I'm not going to read the entire section on the race because this is a 2-hour and 29-minute foot race, and as you can imagine, it gets kind of tedious to say what was going on at mile 1 and 2. In fact, when I watch the marathon, my son says it's like watching paint dry. But to me, it's very interesting because I used to run these things. And now he does too, even though he doesn't like to run. That's another story. I'm going to read the end when the race finishes in the Olympic Stadium, and in the 26th mile mark, the runners have to circle the stadium once to finish the race. And there's a huge crowd waiting in the stadium, whereas most of the race is on the roads where it's thinly populated. And I'll read about what happens when he enters the stadium. And then I have several journalistic accounts of Sohn Kee-chung's life. One is on the 50th anniversary of his marathon race, and a couple others are in the 1988. In the year 1988, when the Olympics came to Korea, and he was able to get a measure of redemption by being one of those who carried the torch in the ceremony, carried the Korean flag. And I'll finish up in 1992 when he, at the age of 80, he traveled to the Barcelona Olympics and saw one of his protégés win the Barcelona Marathon in 1992. It's really a story of oppression and redemption, sort of a classic situation played out in the Olympics. Okay? An estimated 100,000 people had jammed the stadium on this final afternoon of athletics. It was at the Berlin Olympics. not only to see the marathon, but an outstanding program of track and field finals as well. At 5:25 p.m., the 4x400 meter relay event was being contested, with bedlam reigning as spectators cheered a world record time of 39.8 seconds. It was their last chance to see America's Jesse Owens, who led off, passing to Ralph Metcalf. Foy Draper and Frank Wyhoff added 2 more quick laps to give the team a victory by 15 yards. Now, amid the stadium uproar, came the sound of bugles. They announced the arrival at the west end of the stadium of Kitei Son, Sohn Kee-chung, and the crowd cheered wildly once again, emerging from the marathon tunnel but with 150 meters to reach the standard track event finish line. Sohn looked almost like a sprinter as he bowed his legs, covered the final 100 meters in 13.3 seconds for a time of 2:29.19. That's 2 hours, 29 minutes, and 19 seconds. I might add that for someone who is physically fit, to run 1 6-minute mile is a great achievement. It's a standard of fitness that a lot of people aspire to. When you're running a marathon in 2 hours and 29 minutes, you are running 26 consecutive 5-minute miles, which, if you think about it, is almost like an inhuman level of fitness. And the people who win the races today do this in a little over 2 hours, which is something like a 4-minute and 40-second mile repeated 26 consecutive times. So this is quite an achievement. Ernie Harper of England was 600 meters behind, and so the two never were on the stadium track together. Harper and his teammate Seung Nam, also of Korea, who was running under the name Soryu Nan, the Japanese version, however, were only briefly on the track at the same time, finishing 19 seconds apart. Son's remarkable victory made him the first Olympian under 2 hours and 30 minutes at the Olympic Games. This was Japan's first Olympic gold medal, and it was Son's third sub-2:30 marathon. Ernie Harper's magnificent personal best was the best of his career. At the post-race press conference, it became clear that Son understood some English, for he and Harper had a conversation during the race, and Son reported through an interpreter that much of the credit for my victory must go to Harper of England. From the time he started, he kept telling me not to worry about the leader, Juan Zabala of Argentina, but to let him run himself out. And that's what happened. The early leader took such a fast pace that he was unable to maintain it through the whole race, and both Harper and Son were able to run him down and finish ahead of him, which is pretty common in a marathon where you need to pace yourself over the 26 miles. If you consider 5-minute miles pacing yourself, it's another matter. The book also includes a comment on Kitei Son, as they called him. They say he was born in Sinugio, a small, poverty-burdened farming and lumbering village along the Yalu River in what is now the Democratic People's Republic of the Chinese border. It was and still is one of the most primitive regions of Asia. The modernizing influence of the Japanese rule had not reached these hinterlands, and the locals were scarcely aware of the Olympic Games at all. It was just those rugged hills in that wooded, mountainous region that toughened Son into a formidable competitor. He earned his gold medal at the young age of 22 years. He achieved early success on the track over distances from 800 meters through 5,000 meters, and when he turned his attention to the marathon, he won his first 3 races. They were all in Seoul, over a probably short course, and the first 2 were national championships. In 1935, he ran 7 marathons, 4 in Seoul and 3 in Tokyo, and his November world best performance put him on a high list of media favorites in Berlin. He remains the only athlete to have won an Olympic marathon as the reigning world record holder. Hannes Coleman's Antwerp gold became the world's fastest performance, and Johnny Hayes set the world best at the inaugural 49.195 kilometer distance. After the Berlin Olympics, Son retired, having won 10 of his 13 marathons in a short but superb career. They do make note also of the protest on the medal stand. They title this section "From Silent Protest to Highest Honor." The Olympic movement has traditionally emphasized individual athlete or team participation with the goal of performance excellence itself without national identification. Tallies of which a geopolitical entity wins the most medals have largely been a media creation. And today we see that all the time. We want to know which country won the Olympics. But the Olympic movement has never really valued that type of view. It's more been an individual or team achievement. Any NOC course, any NOC, of course, is very proud when members of its delegation earns medals, and national pride runs very high when citizens see one of their own reach the victory stand. Athletes themselves take pride in wearing their nation's colors and emblem on the competition vest. Sohn Kee-chung was such an athlete, an intensely proud Korean. Few could identify with the depths of his emotions in having to endure competing under Japanese colors with a name different from his own. On the Olympic stand, Sohn and his countrymen bowed their heads as the Japanese anthem was played while they were on the podium. As Sohn later told reporters, this was not in reverence to the flag or the anthem, but in polite but silent shame and outrage that their nation lived under the Japanese domination, which it had since 1910. The next day in the major Seoul daily newspaper, the victory dais photo had been retouched with the Japanese rising sun removed from Sohn's sweatshirt. Japanese authorities in Korea were furious and took action against the newspaper by reportedly jailing some of its employees and forcing the newspaper to suspend publication for 9 months. Today we say this would be, they really airbrushed the symbol of Japan out. Today it can be done very easily digitally, and we alter photos all the time, but this was a little more difficult then. The duel between Sohn and Ernie Harper was such an epic battle that the two athletes were brought back to Berlin the following Olympic Games so that the famed cinematographer Leni Riefenstahl could recreate parts of the race for her cameras. She had already exposed 250 miles of film shooting all 136 competition events using an 80-person film crew during the Berlin Olympics. These additional inserts helped her make her film Olympia a classic sports documentary. Of course, Sohn had to wear his Japanese team uniform again, and it pained him immeasurably. Sohn retired after the Berlin Games and was appointed manager of Korea's developing marathon athletes. He had to wait until the end of World War II for Korea to regain its independence. Time has a habit of healing wounds, and for Sohn as well as for all Koreans, 1988 brought something very special. One of the most poignant moments in marathon history during this first modern Olympic century came at the opening ceremonies of the Seoul Olympic Games in 1988. Now 73 years old, Sohn Kee-chung ran into the stadium carrying the Olympic flame. 52 years after becoming Olympic champion, at last he was running on an Olympic track wearing his Korean colors. The 88,000 spectators filling the Olympic Stadium were completely surprised and rose to their feet to give prolonged applause. Seemingly taking energy from these emotions, Sohn, weeping with immeasurable joy, ran so proudly and vigorously that he looked almost as young as in Berlin. Few in attendance will forget it.